Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the dark side of a website I bet most of you use all the time, Craigslist. We've got three stories from the Vile Vision podcast, and I think after we hear them, you might just think twice before you hit reply to that amazing deal you just found.
Yeah, what's so unsettling about these stories is just how they really show that the convenience of online marketplaces sometimes comes with a pretty hefty price tag, and that price is your safety. And especially with Craigslist and its anonymity, well, it can become a playground for people who aren't exactly, on the up and up.
So, story number one is titled The One Night Stand That Almost Ended It All. So, picture this. It's late, you're a 28-year-old guy, and you're looking for a casual encounter. You find an ad posted by someone named Jenny, and, so far it sounds pretty standard, right?
Right, but here's where things get really, really interesting. You know how those late-night infomercials always say, but wait, there's more? Well, in this case, the more is a ton of red flags. Jenny's profile is almost too perfect, she replies super fast. And the address she gives is for like a rundown house on a dead-end street. I mean, come on. It's like she's trying to be in a horror movie.
Seriously, it's like a checklist for how to end up in a horror movie 101. But our protagonist, he's blinded by the thrill of the chase and ignores all these warning signs. He shows up at the house, nobody answers, and then Jenny texts him and tells him to come around back. I don't know about you, but I'm already getting a really bad feeling about this.
Well, yeah, this is just a perfect example of how predators take advantage of us. I mean, think about it. We all want connection or romance or even a good deal. And these people, they know how to create a sense of urgency and use their charm to hide their true intentions.
Yeah, and so he goes around pregnant. It just gets creepier. He sees someone watching him from a window upstairs and then gets another text from Jenny saying, be right there, just freshening up. But then he hears something and sees a figure behind the shed, and finally common sense kicks in and he gets out of there.
See, that's that fight or flight response kicking in as adrenaline's pumping, telling him to get out of there. And it's a good thing he listened to it, too, because as he's driving away, she hears a gunshot and his tire blows out. Talk about close call.
It's straight out of a movie. It turns out it was all a setup, a trap by three people, a woman and two men. They got arrested, but the charges were never made public, which makes it even creepier.
And that's the thing, behind those usernames and profile pictures, you never really know who's there. It's a reminder to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. It might mean you miss out on a good deal, but hey, it's better than ending up as a headline.
Totally little caution, never hurt anyone. So story number two, the truck that almost cost them everything takes us from late-night hookups to something that seems totally normal, selling a used truck. We've got a rancher and his wife trying to get rid of their old work truck. Where? You guessed it, Craigslist. They hear from a woman who seems interested but gives a bunch of reasons why she can't meet them halfway.
And right there, those are classic red flags, inconsistent stories, pressure tactics, unusual payment methods. Think about it. If someone's really interested, they'll usually make things as easy as possible.
Exactly. But this rancher, he's a trusting guy and decides to drive the truck to her even though his wife is suspicious. She gives them a post-dated check and asks them to leave the license plates in their name. Come on, by this point, even someone who doesn't know anything about online safety should be worried.
Right. A post-dated check, it's practically begging for trouble. It means the buyer might not actually have the money and is hoping to vanish before the check bounces.
And you know what's coming, right? The check bounces harder than a basketball. And the woman, of course, has tons of excuses, each more unbelievable than the last. So finally, the rancher and his wife, they realize they've been had and decide to go back and get their truck. They find it in a shed, take it, and leave a note explaining what happened. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, but this is where things take a really scary turn. When scammers realize their plan is falling apart, they get desperate and more dangerous.
2 days later, the woman breaks into their house with a knife. The rancher manages to fight her off, but you can imagine how terrified his wife was. This isn't just a scam anymore. It's a violent home invasion. It completely changes their lives.
This is a really good example of how, even though online stuff might feel separate from real life, the consequences of meeting the wrong people could be really serious. So always meet in public, let someone know where you're going, and don't be afraid to walk away from a deal that seems even a little bit suspicious.
Great advice. Those what-if scenarios can turn into oh-no moments in a second. Our final Craigslist nightmare, the hockey net that almost cost a father his son, takes us to something I think every parent fears.
Yeah, this story is especially scary because it shows how vulnerable children are and how predators use situations where parents might be less careful. Like when a kid is excited about something or they're in a place that seems safe.
So we have a dad and his 11-year-old son super excited about a hockey net they found on Craigslist. They're supposed to meet the seller at a rest stop after dark, which probably wasn't the best idea. They get there, a truck pulls up, but no hockey net. then 2 more trucks show up blocking them in.
See, that's a classic tactic, using multiple vehicles to scare and trap the victims. It's all about taking control and making people feel helpless.
And of course it gets worse. Guys get out of the trucks demanding money. The dad wants to protect his son, so he gives them his wallet, but they want more. They try to pull the boy out of the minivan.
See, by focusing on the child, they're putting a lot of pressure on the dad. They're using his fear for his son to get what they want.
The dad fights back. His son is screaming for help. It's total chaos. And just when all hope seems lost, a police car shows up like it heard the boy's cries. The bad guys run off, leaving the dad and son shaken, but okay.
That's why it's so important for everyone to watch out for each other. If you see something that seems wrong, call the police. Your car might stop something terrible from happening.
All 3 of these stories are different, but they have something in common. Craigslist, while useful, can also be a dangerous place. It reminds us that we have to be just as careful online as we are in the real world, maybe even more so. What really gets me is how important it is to trust your gut feeling.
You're right, we often ignore our intuition. But those gut feelings are usually our subconscious mind, noticing things our conscious mind misses. In these situations, a little bit of doubt can be your best friend.
So how do we stay safe online? We'll talk more about that when we come back for part 2 of our deep dive into the dark side of Craigslist. Welcome back to the deep dive. We just heard some seriously scary stories about how Craigslist, a site that's supposed to help people, can be used for some really bad stuff. It makes you realize that even doing something as simple as replying to an email could have consequences you'd never imagine. So how do we protect ourselves online? How do we find the good stuff and avoid the bad?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think the most important thing is to be a little skeptical and have some strategies to minimize the risk.
So we can't just click reply without thinking we need to be careful.
Exactly. It's like you need to learn the language of online safety. And the first word in that language is trust your gut. If something feels wrong, or a deal is too good to be true, or the person you're talking to just seems weird, don't ignore those red flags. You're better off missing out on a deal than becoming a victim.
That makes sense. It's like they say, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Or in this case, if it seems fishy, it probably is. But sometimes those red flags are really subtle. How can we get better at noticing them?
One way is to learn about the tricks that scammers and predators use. For example, be careful if someone tries to rush you into a decision or wants to use a payment method that isn't secure, or if they ask for personal information that they don't really need.
So it's like learning to read people. Like in poker, you need to figure out what they're really thinking, even if they're blushing.
Exactly. And just like in poker, sometimes the best thing to do is walk away from a deal that seems risky.
Okay, so we've got trust your gut and learn to read people. What else can we do to stay safe online? What about where you meet up?
That's really important. Always meet in a public place that's well lit, like a coffee shop or a bank lobby or even the parking lot of a police station. Don't meet at someone's house, especially if you don't know them well.
So that goes for first dates too, right?
Definitely a public place gives you an out if you feel uncomfortable, and it's safer if something goes wrong.
No romantic picnics in the park for a first date. Got it. What about telling someone where you're going? Is that still a good idea?
It's more than a good idea. It's essential. Before you meet up with someone from online, always tell a friend or family member where you're going, who you're meeting. And when you'll be back, it's like having a safety net.
It's like having someone watching your back just in case things go bad.
And if you're selling something, tell someone you trust about the listing. That way, if you disappear after meeting a buyer, at least someone knows who you were with.
So public places, safety buddies, check and check. What about how you pay? Any red flags there?
Oh yeah, lots. Scammers can be really creative here. Be suspicious if someone asks you to use an unusual payment method, like a wire transfer, gift cards, or cryptocurrency. Those are hard to trace, and if you get scammed, you're probably out of luck.
No wiring money to a prince in Nigeria who promises to make you rich, I guess. What about those post-dated checks? Those always seem sketchy to me.
A post-dated check is a huge red flag, especially if the buyer uses it to pressure you into giving them the item before the check clears. If someone's legitimate, they should be able to use a secure payment platform or just pay cash.
It's like they say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But it's easy to get caught up in wanting a good deal.
Oh yes, scammers know that. They often offer crazy low prices to trick people. They know that a lot of people will ignore warning signs if they think they're getting a steal.
So be careful about prices that seem too good to be true. Stick to safe ways to pay. And avoid deals that seem too good to be true. What about just communicating? Are there any red flags in emails or texts?
Definitely pay attention to how they write. Do they seem pushy, evasive, or way too eager? Are there spelling and grammar mistakes, or do they contradict themselves? Those could be signs that they're not being honest.
It's one of those phishing emails, right? They try to look official, but they're full of typos.
Exactly. And watch out if they ask for personal information that doesn't have anything to do with the deal, like your social security number or your mom's maiden name. Those are classic ways to steal your identity.
So it's not just about being careful what you click on, it's about being careful what you share. It's like we have to be extra careful online, especially with strangers.
Exactly. You need to shift your thinking from trust first, verify later to verify first, trust later when you're online.
It's like measure twice, cut once, but for the internet, verify twice, trust once. So we've talked about a lot, trusting your gut, learning to read people, meeting in safe places, bringing a buddy, being careful about payment methods, and watching out for how people communicate. That's a lot to remember.
It might seem like a lot, but it gets easier with practice. It's all about forming good habits and being a little skeptical online.
That's a good point. But even if we do all that, there's still some risk when we're online. There's no way to be 100% safe. So how do we deal with that? How do we accept the fact that even in the digital age, there are still people who want to hurt others? We'll explore that in part 3 of our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we've been digging into the dark side of Craigslist, hearing all these stories about how dangerous it can be. I mean, it makes you think. The internet's an amazing thing, but it can also be used for some pretty awful stuff.
Yeah, it's true. The internet has changed everything, the way we connect, communicate, do business. But it's also opened up these new ways for crime and people taking advantage of others. And what's really interesting is that these stories make us think not just about how scammers and predators work, but also about some of the darker parts of human nature.
Right, because in the end, it's still people behind those screens making choices good or bad. It's not just about technology, it's about us. So what can these stories teach us about ourselves, about the choices we make when we think nobody's watching?
Well, I think these stories give us a look into the minds of people who are willing to use others for their own benefit. They show how anonymity makes some people do things they wouldn't normally do, how easy money can be tempting, and how people can become numb to the consequences of their actions online.
It's like that saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But maybe it's anonymity that corrupts. It's like people feel like they can do whatever they want because they're hidden behind a screen.
Yeah, anonymity can make you feel disconnected from the real-world impact of what you're doing. It's like road rage. People are more aggressive when they're in their cars because they feel anonymous. Online platforms can be the same way. They can make people lose their inhibitions and forget that their actions have consequences.
So it's like the internet's a mask. People can hide their real selves and become someone who is more daring, ruthless, maybe even cruel.
Exactly. And it's not just anonymity. Some platforms attract people with certain personality types, people who are impulsive risk takers or who lack empathy. They might be drawn to the possibility of making a quick buck or the thrill of manipulating others.
So sometimes it's not even about planning to hurt someone. It's just about seeing an opportunity.
Right? Someone might not start out wanting to scam or hurt someone, but the anonymity of being online combined with a chance to take advantage of something can make them do things they wouldn't normally do. It reminds us that we're all capable of both good and bad, and the choices we make are influenced by the situation we're in.
That's a pretty scary thought. It means anyone could make bad choices if they're in the wrong situation at the wrong time.
It also makes you wonder if maybe society itself is partly to blame. Are we creating a world where getting what you want right away is more important than being ethical? Are we becoming less sensitive to the consequences of our actions, both online and offline?
It's a lot to think about, but I think these stories show that we need to have a bigger conversation about digital ethics, about how we can use the internet for good while minimizing the risks and being responsible for what we do online.
Absolutely. We need to be more than just tech savvy. We need to be ethical savvy.
So it's not enough to just know how to use technology. We have to understand how our actions online affect others.
Exactly. And it's about having empathy, remembering that the people we interact with online are real people, have real lives, feelings, and vulnerabilities.
A deep dive has taken us to some pretty dark places, but it's also reminded us how important human connection, empathy, and making good choices are, even in the digital world.
It's a reminder that we all have a part to play in creating a safer and more ethical online world.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we hope you'll keep thinking about these issues. Be mindful of your own online habits and help create a digital world where empathy, responsibility, and respect are the norm. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.